educate, master, and apprentice model comes really from a while back. I was reading Robert Greene's mastery book, and there he tells us that back then, in the medieval times, we would have blacksmiths who had the requirement to build more swords, more shields, more armors, and they couldn't do it by themselves, so they had to recruit apprentices. And the way they did it was the blacksmith would receive this new apprentice, and they had to stay there for at least 7 years. They had like this kind of contract where the apprentices had to stay with the master for 7 years. After that, they could go and open their shops and everything. So what that really did was it worked for both sides. The master was able to get a whole lot more productive in those 7 years, build a lot more, grow a lot more, gain a lot more. But also the students, the apprentice, they learned really fast from somebody who had already done it. So they could improve their skills at 3 times, 4 times the speed they could if they were doing it by themselves, which is what we noticed, and we said, okay, it's time to take those things from the past and see how we can apply them to the modern needs. And we did. We took that and we extracted some, and we built a methodology around that so that we can, instead of creating good swords and excellent armors, we can create really extraordinary digital products. So we take a model one step further, and what we really want to do is allow the students to also be able to teach once they have mastered or once they have learned a particular skill. So this is based on peer mentoring, and it's something that we know works. We've tested it here a lot, and what it does, or why it works, maybe we have a reference from a really good book that touches on this. We'll put it in the link so that you can have it. But the main concept behind it is that masters they create very complex mental models. So once we start learning something, we start creating the synapses, and at the first they're very weak, and they're weak. But as we keep practicing, they start getting stronger and stronger. And by the end, a master, somebody who's really skillful in an art, they would have their mental models be very complex, while a student it has a completely different mental model. So they're essentially looking at a skill from a completely different angle, completely different world. So it becomes very hard to communicate that for the master. While a student who has just learned a skill, he knows exactly, he's at a very near point from the other one that's just starting to learn. So he can communicate that a lot better. And we've seen it here in Edukathe, and we have people here that are like, okay, let's take an example from school, right? I had a teacher that was, telling me a particular concept I didn't understand, but then I turned and I talked to a friend who was very good at this, and she turns around, explains it to me, and then I get it. So we've seen this in many other places here in Edukathe. So we know it works, and it does something extra, and that is, it helps the student that's teaching the concept relearn it and better learn it, better appropriate the learning, and it also helps the other student learn it a lot faster. So it's a win-win.